All right, everybody, we're going to get started. So I'd like to welcome you guys to Peach Pit, which is going to be a talk show that's focused primarily on the Peachtree District, okay? But before we get started, before you say anything, I just want to get our disclaimer out of the way, okay? Any views or opinions shared on the show are solely that of the individual contributor and do not reflect the views of Peach Pit, any FRC team, First, Georgia First, or any of their affiliates and sponsors. Okay?
Yeah. So the idea behind this show is to serve as an FRC talk show that focuses primarily on the Peachtree District. We can't promise that we won't discuss out-of-state teams because, they come here, especially if they came to Gainesville. But we'll primarily focus on the PCH district. So, seeing how we're a talk show, we're going to be having an open discussion about a variety of topics, everything from large news to how individual teams are performing. So don't be surprised if you see us throw a little bit of shade or some hot takes. And ultimately, we're just hoping to provide some entertaining and engaging discussion for our audience. So without further ado, let me introduce ourselves. I'm one of your hosts, Anupam Goli. I was a mentor for 1648 G3 Robotics since 2013, and now I'm a mentor for 1746 Auto. Sonny?
Yeah, my name is Sonny. I am taking a bit of a break. I'm on sabbatical, let's put it that way. I am an alumni of 1261 The Robo Lions and a former mentor of 1648 G3 Robotics. Kyle?
My name is Kyle Fender. I am a MC, or one of the MCs for Georgia First. I'm the alumni coordinator for Georgia First. I'm a alumni from Team 1002, and I was a mentor with 1648 early, and now I'm back with my original Team 1002.
Nice.
Gotcha. My name's Kellen Hill. I'm an alumni of Team 1625 up in Winnebago, Illinois. But I've been down in Georgia since 2013 as a mentor for Team Auto up in Cumming, Georgia, Team 1746.
Nice. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our Gainesville review, right? So let me just take a moment to announce some of the major winners. So the winners were 6919, the Alliance captain, 1747, the first pick, 6705, the second pick, and 4112, the backup bot. Our finalists, 832, 4188, and 1746. And our chairman's winner was 1648, and our engineering inspiration winner was 1619.
6919.
Well, guys, I booped it. Okay. All right. So let's just start out with Gainesville. What are your thoughts? Who's going to go first?
Well, let me get something out of the way because I'm sure a lot of the viewers saw the train wreck that happened for Team Auto this last weekend. It was quite a ride for us.
Would you mind enumerating the train wreck?
No.
What exactly wrecked?
All right, so I don't know if it's so much of a train wreck as much as it was that the train never started moving in the first place. But we came in the event a week or two behind. So the competition robot had never moved before we unbagged it at the event. So we're a bit behind, did a lot of systems testing at the event, ran into a few issues there. So it took a little bit for us to even get a drivetrain moving, let alone scoring any game pieces. So we started out playing defense, but luckily with some hard work and some effort by the end of the event, we were near the higher efficiency hatch panel scores by the end of the event, and luckily caught the attention of our third seed Alliance captain to fill out their Alliance as a third bot. But happy with how the weekend turned out, considering how it started. But
So how many cylinders did you guys bend?
For a hatch mechanism, I think we went through 3 of the itty bitty little ones we had before putting out another one that was equally as itty bitty, but luckily made it through the end of the event.
It's a good thing you guys have Automation Direct for that sponsor, right?
Oh yeah.
Hook up on cylinders.
And that doesn't. We also broke 2 other cylinders for our intake in one of our first matches. We got stuck on the cargo ship. Those ones actually, one of them straight up sheared.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happens.
Along with Automation Direct, there were a number of helpful teams at the event. 1414, I think, wound up with the cylinder that actually saved us, but
Irony.
6705 and a couple others were kind enough to offer cylinders they had on hand as well.
Wow, Kyle.
Very Very ironic.
Way to be cool.
I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, so that's cool to know you guys had your typical Gainesville experience.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just me, but I felt that the game was a lot harder than it was going to be. Like, watching reveal videos and watching teams, like, show off their cool mechanisms, I thought teams would be, like, solo rocketing at least a handful of times.
Right.
But I only see it once. I mean, what did you see, Kyle?
I mean, just from my perspective with these matches, I think the real element that really showed up was defense. I think from when the video was announced, we thought that it was going to be another Recycle Rush, where it was literally just offense, there was no real defense, and you just basically played your own game, pure offense. Then when defense shows up, it changed the dynamic of the game entirely. And especially if you think about it, it's a low scoring game in terms of, it's not like these 400-point games. It's a like closer to 100+ point game. So it's a real different look when you're actually out on the field looking at the game dynamic and seeing, it's very easy to kind of see like a 3-point lead go away very fast.
Yeah, like last year, if you were hit with defense, it was okay because your points were still racking up.
Exactly.
But this year, if you don't get the pieces there, you're not scoring points at all, which I think it's definitely not new, but I think a lot of teams sort of got a little too comfortable. One cube on the scale, all of a sudden you're like,
yeah,
like 100 points, yeah, let's go.
And along those lines, like the scoring, there were safe zones for scoring last year. The scoring zones were a lot bigger. I think something a lot of teams underestimate is how difficult it is to just hit the window for putting a hatch panel on or putting a piece of cargo in. So I think this is very much so a driver's game. But I think as much drive practice as you can get, or as much vision targeting you can get, I think that's going to help teams throughout the season.
Yeah, placing hatches look like insanely hard. Like,
yeah,
it seemed like teams really just gave up on that for a little while. Like, screw it, we'll do cargo. We'll get those points, we'll get the wins, and then we'll come back to the hatches when it mattered.
It seemed like the hatches were deceptively difficult, and I think part of it was the lanes and like the visibility. So like scoring a hatch panel on the side of the cargo wasn't an easy task because you couldn't really align yourself that easily, and even if you could, the actual structure to score or the room for error you had to score on that was much lower than on the rocket.
Yeah, and on the cargo ship they also had the pegs, which I think were used to allow or to not allow a single disc to cover 2 goals.
Right.
But that very, very much so narrowed the window in which you could get one of those hatches on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what were some of the teams that stood out to you guys? Right.
Let's go with the obvious one, 1747. They just seem to have a lot of things automated.
Peachtree District, yo.
I know it's an Ohio State team, but like you can't really talk about Gainesville without talking about 1747 and how they came in, knew exactly what they wanted to do, and just won the event.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you have to describe what their performance was like.
Yeah, and I mean, they really worked on their machine because like they did not start out very hot at all, but towards the end they were clicking. It looks like they had all their automated scoring stuff figured out.
Well, I got a comment from them at the beginning of the event, towards the very beginning, that their competition robot had also not moved. So
Perfect.
They at least had their competition practice bot moving, which very fluidly transferred over to their competition robot. Not so much in our case.
Yeah.
Wow. I would probably say one of the ones that kind of really stood out to me was more. I would say 1414 was a little bit of a sleeper, just star in the way that they were able to handle the cargo. They were able to handle all of the hatches, everything else. But then specifically with their level 3 climb, I think that they were able to. Once they got through a couple falls, I think they were able to handle it perfectly.
There was some pretty good memes on Reddit about their fall. So.
Great memes. Great memes.
Yeah, I mean 1414, like they looked great. Really wish what happened hadn't happened, but we'll talk about that a little later. For me, I would say I really want to say 1102 was kind of my like standout, right? But I'm gonna put my vote towards 6919, right?
Ooh.
second-year team from Albany, which we don't hear a lot from teams in that area. Last year they had a solid scale bot. Maybe not the fastest, but for a rookie team to build a competitive scale bot, that's pretty good.
Right.
They come in here with their second season, solid hatch bot, level 3 climb, first seed. They win the event. They do decent line selections, which is more than you can say for a lot of teams.
That's true.
And right now they're sitting number 1 in district.
And they got the cling bling with the EI for double medals. Yeah.
So
Yeah, they just kind of swept.
yeah, which is great because once again, second-year team, and they're from Albany, which unfortunately we don't hear a lot about teams from outside the Atlanta area. So they get my vote for one of the most impressive teams at Gainesville.
Yeah. Couple off the top of my head. As Sonny mentioned, 1102 I think was for the Georgia robots at the event was one of the higher efficiency bots, right up there with 1414. I think those were the two that really stand out for cranking out hatch panels, cargo, being able to do the third level climb.
Man, 1102 was so smooth with cargo. Like, especially right at the end when they got their mechanism drivetrain, I think, tuned in. They were like, I think they built one of the best mechanism drives in the state. But on top of that, they were just using it like crazy. And I think they would just load up their side of the cargo ship in maybe 30 seconds, which is pretty impressive for the current state of the game.
I think they had plenty of practice. John Fogarty posted that they went to Johnson Research Development's field and got a lot of practice in it. You could tell when they did Sandstorm, right? They weren't using autonomous, they were using their camera. And it honestly looked like their driver wasn't even using a camera. It looked like he actually could see and score at times.
I did not know that was not autonomous. Okay. Impressive. But I think most teams are trying to go fully autonomous, right? Because I don't know any other teams that are trying to do hybrid. Like,
I think there's a various. I'd wager that there aren't very many autonomouses. From what I saw out there, I think the majority of teams were on the sticks using camera feedback from the robot, driving the robots in Sandstorm.
I think you're going to see a lot more teams doing a hybrid rather than going full autonomous, just because I think not having the autonomous kind of allows you to a little bit more flexibility in terms of being able to react to the other alliances, moves, and everything else. But I do think software is going to be important, especially as we've talked about. The hatches are very, very deceptive in just getting them on. Even I was looking back at one of the finals matches for like 1746, like just even going straight forward to put the hatch on there. It was a toss up of whether they would get it or not.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I think I saw a lot of teams run a lot of different routines, and I was kind of impressed. I'm like, how are they doing all this stuff? And sometimes you spend an entire evening like tuning one routine. But I guess it makes sense that they were all doing camera stuff because sometimes they were going 2 on the rocket, sometimes they were going 1 in front, 1 on the rocket. So definitely kind of interesting.
And to be honest, we weren't even using a camera for the first half of the event. We were looking at the big screen that was doing the.
Wow. Okay.
So would that be another red card?
No, it's entirely legal. It was brought up in a Q&A, but it was irritating every now and then when the field camera would zoom in on the other side of the field and you were driving blind.
All right, so shout out to Georgia First AV. Leave that full field view up.
Oh, no.
And what if they sandstorm the cameras on the field too? Like somebody just holds up a sticky note. It's like no.
That would throw in a new challenge, right?
Our performance would have suffered. I'll tell you that.
I'm pretty sure that would be the originally intended challenge.
Yeah. It would definitely be interesting. I got to be on the cameras on the joysticks, so my apologies.
All right, Kyle, we can blame you then.
Yeah, you can.
It's like, damn it, Kyle. Okay. So, what about some of the strategies that we saw at Gainesville, right? My biggest note was just how teams seemed to give up on hatches for a little while and quickly just move over to cargo into the cargo ship, right? Mm-hmm. But then towards the end of, towards the end of the event and a eliminations as cargo ships filled up quicker, it sort of went back to hatches, right?
Right.
So, did you guys notice other things like that, or what do you think about that?
I think it's gonna be an interesting development through the season. It's very much so going to depend on what robots are at the event, what kind of pairings you'll see in the elimination matches, who's capable of what. In our instance, we could only do hatches since we were so far behind on robot development that we were lucky to be paired with a couple of cargo bots. But yeah, I think once teams start hitting the ceiling for the amount of cargo they can score, you're going to have to start seeing where else you can get points, and it's either going to be further up on those rockets, or if you can start without null hatch panels, getting the 2 points per each one of those panels is going to be somewhere else to get points. So be a mixture of those things, I think.
Yeah, starting with those as null hatch panels, I know that you guys tried that at Gainesville. I think it's kind of risky, right? I think an alliance has to really carefully gauge whether they can do that, because if the other alliance is blocking out cargo on just a cargo ship, that's 6 pieces of cargo across null hatch panels. But if you can't even get a couple of hatch panels up and you think you can do the entire thing, then you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and that's where I think in our case, I don't think there was never a situation where they were waiting for another hatch panel to be placed.
Mm-hmm.
There was always another opportunity to score a cargo between the cargo ship and the first layers of the rocket. So
that actually brings an interesting point. So hatch only bots, on paper, they don't seem like they're really worth it, but at these weaker district events and weaker events, do you think there'll be a commodity for these robots that can specialize in cargo?
I think it draws some throwbacks to 2015 of robots that were able to only stack totes, and others that were only able to then cap those stacks.
Right.
So if you get the right pairing, we were only able to do hatches, but there were other specialists out there that were very much so specialized on cargo. Grady Robotics was one of those that were capable of scoring quite a few cargo through the event. But if you can get the right pairing of those two robots, those can be a deadly option for a second and a third robot on an alliance.
Yeah, I think it's definitely goes down to consistency with the hatches. So I think 1746 really got to a point where they were really consistent with being able to grab the hatches from the loading station and to be able to put them on, and it went down from, let's say, 10 seconds to realistically more like 3 to 5 seconds. So as soon as you put it on, you came back out, you're fine. I think it just also goes into the cargo as well. So you notice with some of the cargo bots going back to 1648, 1648, even towards the later part in the elimination rounds, they still had some issues with even scoring cargo themselves, because they can score cargo somewhat consistently, but it depended on where the cargo ended up in their manipulator. And so they had to spend extra time even in the drive up to the cargo ship itself.
So you mean lots of readjusting a little?
A lot. And then they would have to rebound them. They would have to rebound basically, because majority of the times when I was watching the matches, they would shoot the ball. If it didn't get into the cargo ship, it would bounce back, and 9 times out of 10, robot design wise, it would come off of their robot, so then they would have to chase it, rebound, and try again.
Can we talk about real quick how bouncy these cargo balls are?
Very. And how fragile they are.
Yeah, they are also very fragile and very bouncy.
Yeah, but how does the bounciness play into it? Because they go everywhere when you run into them, but I've seen pretty snappy intakes. I don't think it's that big a deal.
I think it's more for missed shots.
If
you miss a shot, it's
the ball's gonna go the other side of the field.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna move on from our Gainesville review, right? That was a pretty good wrap, I think, and we're gonna get into some of our freestyle topics, right? Our first freestyle topic is sort of the big eye-hot elephant in the room, the no-show and semifinal.
There's the tiebreaker match.
3.
Yeah, tiebreaker match and semifinals.
Right.
For those that don't know or didn't watch, 1414 apparently didn't show up by the time the buzzer rang for the field timeout, and they weren't allowed to play the match.
Right.
So I'll just start off by saying that, even though that kind of sucks, to the credit of Georgia First and everybody, that was really publicized. Like, if this happens, they're going to be pretty stringent about it. So personally, I think it's a tough call. It really sucks, but it seemed fair to me, right?
I'll say, being one of the people that had to be there, hear the argument and everything else, it's fair. Like, being the MC, I had to help with basically keeping time along with the rest of the key volunteers. And the reality is, it's a different situation if they were in the arena and realistically walking up to the field. There's leniency there, but we're talking about going to another level in our district, and if you can't, especially for a veteran team, if you can't be inside the arena as the timer hits 0, then that's on you. That's not on us. That is us trying to up the game in our district. And so, for me, the fact that they weren't even in the arena, they were somewhere else. It's like I can't really feel as bad about it. I've made similar calls in other first organizations. Like, if you're not there, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, so I kind of wonder where this sort of directive came from, because it kind of seems like it's being pushed really hard. So is it really just coming from the people inside Georgia First, or is it really coming from First Wide to crack down on this?
If I remember in the email that was sent out pre-Gainesville, I believe Jan Sperlin, the head ref at Gainesville, had explicitly stated that, all right, here's how this is expected to be called. This is a directive coming from First. If I remember correctly, I
actually have it up here. So I'll read it verbatim so that I'm not gonna paraphrase. So section 12.7.4 describes timeouts that are available to alliances during the playoffs. For the most part, these rules have not changed. However, the referee crew has been given explicit instructions on how to enforce this rule. The way that First wants this rule consistently enforced across all events is slightly different from how we've handled it at Georgia First events. And so for all events, when the timeout buzzer sounds, all teams must be on the field. We are being instructed to close the gates to the field when the timeout buzzer sounds and to not let any robots that are late onto the field. And that is a real thing. So it's not just well, if you're on the field, let's say there are a couple times I know the timeout buzzer hit and 1746 was still on the field. That's fine, because you guys aren't actively causing a delay to actual gameplay itself. But
yeah, because at that point, you guys can start calling out the teams and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So
we were basically in that pre-staging to make sure all robots are connected, everything else, the FTA can do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the case of what they're putting here, it's we're trying to stay on time and trying to keep you guys responsible. And especially, we put also safeguards to make sure that teams had adequate knowledge of when the timeout was ending. I made sure as the MC, giving basically every 30 seconds or even every minute, and then coming down to the last minute, making sure to constantly update to make sure that teams know, hey, you have this time left.
Yeah, that's right. As an alliance, we often had one of our drive team members or pit members just having their eyes on that clock just to make sure we're moving no later than a minute and 30 seconds to get everybody on the field, because we were aware of the risk. Obviously, I have some biased viewpoint as a team that was on the other side of the field, but
a little bit.
But
that's where the irony comes in.
Yeah, I was gonna say there were certainly situations throughout the entire elimination series, not just that semifinal match, that our alliance struggled to get out on the field in a fully prepared sense. But we worked to get everybody out there. There was a match, I think 4188 started without pressure built up on their robot, so they could only play with cargo. So there were some rough bits to it, but we were able to stick it through.
If I could make a suggestion, so if teams are worried about the timeouts and all that, one thing that we did when I was on G3 was we would have like mobile pit cabinets, and you don't need to build mobile pit cabinets or anything. But if you can get your pit tools and everything that you think you'll need to play in eliminations and bring them to the queuing area, or like even just close to the queuing area, then that saves time going back to your pit to work on it, and you can be right there at the field when the timeout buzzer rings.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I was wondering is, like right on Chief Delphi or something, that they were deploying code. Like, if you're deploying code, why are you going back to your pit, right? Like, I'm not gonna like victim blame them and say, oh, it's like ultimately their fault. I mean, it is kind of ultimately their fault, but you know, really move your tools over, do whatever you have to. You really don't need to go back to the pit, right? So.
Well, and to 1414's credit, from posts on Chief Delphi or talking to him right after it happened or right after the event, they entirely own up to the responsibility that it was on them to get out on the field. They took it well as well as they could, but to their credit, they understood that it was on them.
Yeah, and so I think it's a hard lesson learned for everybody, because obviously 14-14 didn't play, but I don't think anybody really wanted to watch that happen, right? It doesn't feel good. So hopefully this is a good step forward for everybody going on, that we won't see this for the rest of the district. For the rest of the season from the rest of the district.
Yeah. And I think it also shows a little bit of where we've come to in Georgia First. Like, the fact that we can hold that line, like, if you look at at our past regionals in our history as Georgia First, a lot of stuff was done so that, it would be easier for teams. But the reality is, as we're being challenged as a district to kind of step ourselves up, we had to match that with how we enforce rules and everything else. Like, the SEC doesn't just become the SEC from being the same as all these other conferences. Like, you see how it's officiated a lot. There's a lot of different officiating in the SEC. A lot of things that you don't get away with a little bit.
At least they aren't Pac-12 refs.
That's also true.
It took me a lot longer than I care to admit that you weren't talking about the Securities and Exchange Commission. I was like, why are you bringing them into this? Okay.
To be fair, it's like 6 months from football season.
Yeah, it is.
Let's say that's the reason. Okay. So moving on, our next topic, right? At Gainesville, we saw a lot of level 3 climbs, right? More than I think we probably would have seen in this game.
Right.
The topic is, are level 3 climbs too powerful? Are they OP?
I think in these early weeks, they are a little bit, just because 12 points is actually a lot in this game in terms of like game pieces scored and actions that can be done. And like in these early weeks, that 12 points is going to give alliances a major boost. And if there's a lack of level 3 climbers, then those top seeded alliances will get them and usually have a pretty decent chance of advancing. But in later weeks, as more teams develop level 3 climbs, and as more teams get better at playing Destination Deep Space, I think the climb points are going to matter, but they're not going to matter as much.
Yeah, I'm curious how it'll develop. I think Gainesville was a bit one of the deeper events. I imagine those level 3 climbs will have a bigger impact at events where there aren't quite as many of them. But yeah, I think those teams capable of level 3 climbs are going to really benefit earlier in the season. I'd like to think that teams Hatch and Cargo Game are going to up themselves to the point where we're going to see some more robots capable of going toe to toe with those level 3 climbers with scoring game pieces.
Because realistically, you're looking at right now, week 1, it took right about 45 seconds for someone like 832 to do a successful climb, and that's not even guaranteed. I think as you go on later in the season, I think you'll see that the amount of impact a level 3 climb is gonna almost stay the same, but the level with cargo, with the rockets and everything else will increase, and so that means that not only are you gonna have to be consistent with your level 3 climb, you have to not spend so much time on it.
See, but I don't know if I don't know if the cargo hatch efficiency will ever come to the point where it'll truly overshadow a level 3 climb, right? Because 12 points or a 9-point differential between just parking on the platform, you're talking about 2 full bays, right? So 2 pieces of cargo, 2 hatch panels.
Right.
And that's 4 pieces of cargo. And even if you do a level 3 climb in 30 seconds, which is a fair bit of time, honestly, are you going to tell me that there's going to be robots that are going to be able to do full bays in 30 seconds? That's 4 game pieces in under 30 seconds. So less than 10-second cycle times, right? So
I don't know if it's so much that. I understand that part of it, but I think the case is that the level 3 climbers are going to keep doing what they're doing, and they're kind of peaked out at that state.
Mhm.
But anybody that's capable of scoring hatches and cargo, I think we're going to see some more improvement out of those teams throughout the season. So that's where I think they're going to make up some ground.
yeah.
But yeah, I certainly think that 12 points at the end of the match is incredibly valuable. To speak a little bit to it, I'd like to see live scoring be a bit more accurate. We got used to it by the end of the event, where we'd see like our score was up. I think at
Wild
finals.
20-point swing.
Yeah, exactly. In finals 3, we had a feeling.
Come on, Kyle.
No. In the defense,
Come
in the defense of scoring and everything else, I think audience-wise, I think it is honestly a great thing, because if you think about the way that we've gone with games, real-time scoring is great, but you see a crowd become demoralized towards the end. So if you know you're going to get beat, it's just like, oh well, I'm kind of giving up on this game.
Yes, the suspense was certainly there.
Yeah, there's suspense and surprise, and as an MC, I'm like, that's exactly what we need. Just inject that just right into me, like let's go. Surprises are great, but I will say it does need to probably get a little bit more. I would say real time, at least in the majority of the match, at least in the last part of the match, you know.
Yeah, it seemed like one side of the field would count climbs, but then the other
Yeah.
side wouldn't.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah,
was-
so I think the biggest thing that gets to me is like consistency around when things are scored, right? I get that the way scoring is done, you can't do completely real time, right?
Right.
But when like one alliance is like climbs counted and like one alliance doesn't, you're kind of like, I'm not really sure about this score here. So like maybe a good way would be to say, hey, we're only going to count climbs at the very end, right?
Yeah.
So that way you still have some suspense because like climbs aren't counted.
Right.
But then like one alliance isn't freaking out because they think they won, you know.
I agree with that. It's right now. It's a question of the personnel. That's also the question.
I like Kyle's point earlier, though. I'm a fan of the suspense. Even as a drive coach trying to make calls during the match, to
It's
sit
a
there,
rush. It's a rush,
sit
man.
there wondering afterwards how it's going to shake out. I think that's a cool feeling.
Yeah, but when it doesn't shake out your way, when
Yeah.
you thought it did, that's not a.
We were considering where we were by Saturday night. We were pretty happy with how things
Oh,
turned out. So
Fair enough.
that was good by that point. Sure.
But yeah, I mean, so going back to level 3 climbs,
Right.
I think teams will definitely catch up. I wonder if we're going to see a multi-robot level 3 climb in our district, right? I know that a lot of teams have teased a lot of different things, and I mean, I say a lot of teams, but only like 1678 has like shown a solid level 3 climb. I feel like teams are going to try it. I feel like teams are not going to be able to do it. I feel like teams are going to flip a lot on the robots.
Well,
They're top heavy.
so I have my couple of curiosities. So we've established that there are already, even through just one event, there are a handful of teams very capable of level 3 climbing. So my curiosity is going to be, so how those teams go about improving it, if it's speeding it up, if it's adding on the capability of bringing somebody else up with you. But my other curiosity is what other teams are going to be kind of capable of adding on that capability throughout the season. I'm curious to see how that plays out.
What do you mean, like adding on to that capability?
Like teams that weren't able to climb at their first event, but are able to climb later in the season. Like I think 4188 has the pieces there. They weren't able to do it consistently, but just for developing that consistency, or the teams that just didn't have it to start with, but are kind of seeing some ideas on how others did it.
Yeah.
Might work on adding it in themselves.
I would say one might be for me that I saw was 5109. 5109 had a very interesting climb. I think they have a lot of the mechanical background to be able to kind of make that happen for the robot. And especially with real estate. Real estate is a big thing on these robots. The robot is lower to the ground and everything else. I think what you're going to see a lot of is, like, I don't think you're going to want to see a lot of these ramp bots. Because even looking at some other regionals and some other district events, ramp bots
Yeah, I think
are scariest thing ever.
ramp bots are dead on arrival, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Like this game, most games, every game, whatever. Just dump it around. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty curious about like. Completely lost my train of thought. Whatever.
I've got a video. Of
We're doing it
59.
live.
I got a video of 5109 over here.
Yeah, let's see it, man.
Let's see it real
See
quick.
it.
All right, let's pull it up. So you can see like how their climb works. They got some interesting structure there going on. I don't know, it seems pretty quick. It seems very consistent. They do it slowly but safely. It doesn't look like they have any trouble with it at all.
And that's kind of where I'm going with it. You don't want to be slapdash, especially with a multi-robot climb. And I will say with, let's say, an 1102 and even a 1414, I don't know if they're going to want to risk trying to do a multi-robot climb with the methods that they use to actually do their level 3 climb. They would have to significantly change their design, it seems like to me, to really take advantage of that.
Well, you're thinking multi-robot climb, like carry somebody with you, right? But I don't know. I feel like there's like other ways to get another robot on the platform. Because like last year, what 1102 would do is they would hook on and like drive out of the way, and then they could pull themselves up next to a partner.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of wonder if 1102 and 1414 could get on the same platform at the same time, like not side by side. Maybe one of them gets on first, and then the other one kind of like dangles off on one side. You know?
Yeah, I think we're going to see some interesting acrobatics throughout the season to get two robots up there. My curiosity is somewhat along the lines of, is it worth it to get multiple robots up there? If it's a situation where you can fluidly do it without too much time, I think yes. Otherwise, I think there's a lot of risk to it. My other concern is the amount of time it takes. So like the 1678 climb, my concern about that is you're taking what is 99 times out of 100, or a greater percentage than that even, you're taking the most valuable robot on your alliance and having him sit there and wait for the other two to get over there. You're getting the extra points out of it, yeah, but you're also taking time off of your most valuable robot, as well as the time from the two other robots to get lined up in order to make that movement.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about it like point differential, right? So if you have a level 3 and then 2 level 1s versus 3 level 3s, right? That's what, 18-point differential, right? So 18 points is roughly 4 bays, right?
Right.
So in 30 seconds, is your alliance going to fill up 4 bays worth of scoring? And I would say that's a hard no for anybody out there.
At least now.
At least, fair enough. At least right now. I would say for most Petrie District teams towards district championships, that's going to be a no as well. So do you take that point differential and move forward?
I would say no. I think when you think about districts, the thing I always tell my team is sometimes you're not playing the game, you're playing the district. And the reality is, I don't think by the time you get to the state championship, you're going to need that multi-robot climb. You probably will need to be able to be sufficient or efficient with your cargo, with your hatches and everything else. And if you can get to the level 3, even as a single robot, or even at level 2, great. But I don't think it's necessary. Like, play the district and kind of let it play from there. If you can develop it, great. But it's almost a question of, is it worth your time when you can realistically play the district and play it well? That way you're getting the most out of your district points. Because think about it, a lot of these teams, they may not have the driver training to actually be able to be good at setting up to get onto the ramp successfully. Even if look at 2018, we had a couple robots that were trying to do the whole ramp idea, and that failed miserably. So,
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on from the level 3 topic, even though it's still pretty juicy. And we'll see how that plays out, right? Because we have Dalton and Albany coming up. Weaker events on our schedule, but we'll see how level 3 climbs play out there as well. We're going to hit this last topic real quick. Should teams consider not going to Gainesville in the future, especially Petrie District teams? And the reason for asking this is this past weekend, one of the winners was from Indiana, 1747. A lot of awards, rankings, eliminations, picks. Roughly 170 points left the district, right? Now, those teams can't use them in their own districts, but that means that teams didn't get those wins, those awards, those rankings here. So if you're a team, and you guys are from 1746, you're from 1002, but even the average team, do you consider not going to Gainesville so that you're not fighting for these points with strong out-of-state teams?
yeah, that's why we didn't go to Gainesville. Because quite literally, we saw what happened last year, and we were like, no, we're not doing that to ourselves. So we chose Albany and Dalton specifically. Realistically, also because of how it fares out with things like chairmans and things like that, it fares a little bit better. But we don't want to have to deal with possibly losing out on those points because we're playing not just the game, we're playing the district, and we want to get to the World Championship.
Hey Kyle, what are we also not playing? Like the game, but what?
The district. We're not just playing the game, we're playing the district.
I feel like that's a t-shirt just waiting to be made.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming soon, PCH Pit t-shirts.
Wow. All right. Yeah, I mean, so you guys seriously thought about like chairmans when like picking events and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course, because the whole point of it is we want to be the best team there. And it's not just even best team there, like, oh, all the other teams are worse there, but, you want a showcase type of win. And yeah, there's we've talked about risk, right? If you go to the Gainesville event without state teams, great. And if you do great, awesome. But you want to show yourself as dominant with other Georgia teams because those are the teams you're going to be judged against when it comes to these awards, let's say with the Petrie District State Championship. So for us as 1002, we want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success in being shown as a dominant Georgia team compared to other Georgia teams. And so it just doesn't seem risk versus reward that Gainesville would work well in that aspect, especially being a week one. Week one, you have to look at all the mistakes that are happening with all the other teams, and then you take it into week two, and you see a significant improvement.
Yeah, where you don't have to deal with teams like 1747. What about you, 1746 boys?
Well, given our track record at the venue, I mean, how could we say no to Gainesville?
Points, man, points.
Points is a
seriously though, regardless of the venue or us having any history there, we for I don't know how many years now we've done week one events because we like getting that learning lesson right up front and center. How's the robot performing? How do we kind of need to readjust to make sure we're going to hit our goals by later in the season? I think it's good to get a first glimpse of that as early in the season as you can get.
Yeah.
So that's why we prefer it. It's also a 40-minute drive from our school. Proximity was a huge deal. We're lucky enough to have another event within 20 minutes of our school in week 5. So, yeah, proximity played a huge part in it for us.
2 events that close to your school?
Right?
Who are you bribing?
The right people.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that, personally, I don't mind out-of-state teams coming in. I'm a big fan of seeing what other teams from other regions have come up with because when you compete in Georgia, I mean, you're exposed to the Georgia teams and their events. And back in 2016 when we first got to districts, one of my complaints was our district is all Georgia teams, and I'd really like to see I really wanted our district to be a little bigger, just because it brings a little more different design philosophies and styles. So, like New England teams, they have like crazy strong drivetrains, and Texas teams have crazy mechanisms and unique ideas with that. I just want to see a little different design philosophies and be exposed to those other ideas, and that's why I don't really mind out-of-state teams coming in.
Yeah.
But
See, I mean, I don't really see that our district has that singular design philosophy. Like you see, one team has crazy arms and linkages, and one team is building elevators and drivetrains are different. So I think in that way we are unique. But I think one of the things that's allowed the district to be as successful as it's been is because we've been a little bit insulated from the rest of first, right?
right.
In the past, you'd have strong teams and definitely strong Peachtree teams put up good fights, but we would just get spanked and the banners would all leave the state.
Basically.
Yeah.
Now the awards stay, that lets teams build up sponsorships, money, and things like that, right? And right now, I think Gainesville's still like kind of a tiny kept secret. Like teams in Indiana and Chesapeake seem to know what's up. Texas is a district now.
Texas
So
district.
that means
We're gonna get Team 1745 from Texas
Yes.
to come next year, so we can get the sequential alliance going.
dream team. I mean, you have 1745, but then when you have like stronger teams that like realize what's up, and 118, 148 coming in here, I kind of wonder if maybe in the close future there will be a Gainesville where no in-state team or in-district team actually takes home a banner, which in my opinion would not be all that great for the district. Like
Yeah.
both from a reputation standpoint and just from overall like helping our district. Right?
Yeah, because like all those points will be going out of state, and any team who would go to Gainesville at that point would just be at a disadvantage.
They're taking our banners, man.
But throwing it way back to when I first got into this thing, so I've been doing first to some degree since 2005. But it was the case where we'd go to events and you'd play against the Wild Stangs, the Beatty Beast, these legendary teams. But you'd go to these events and you'd get killed by these teams. But it was the case where our team would come home and the reaction was, well, it wasn't that, oh, well, they have sponsors, and we weren't coming up with excuses. We said, we want to beat that team next time. And I think that's where I'm a huge fan of those competitive teams coming in, because I think it's a really inspirational thing to get your butt kicked.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think for the average Peachtree, there are plenty of teams who are doing butt kicking.
Yeah.
Like the 1746, 832, 4188, they still hand out kickings all the time.
Yeah.
If you guys want your butts kicked, you go to champs like everybody else. Okay? Leave everybody. Let everybody else get beaten up by the local powerhouses. Right?
Hey, we got our butts kicked this last weekend, I'll tell you that.
Okay, so we are going to move on to the Dalton district coming up this weekend, right? So the Dalton district is kind of interesting because it's a bit of a smaller event, but it's the first event outside of the Atlanta area, and typically tends to be a little bit weaker, right? And even though there are a few teams that are going from Gainesville straight to Dalton, there's going to be like 35 or 36 teams that are at Dalton that haven't played before,
Right.
right? So what do you guys think we're going to see? Are we just going to see a Gainesville round 2, or are we going to see a little bit more development, or what's going to go on?
I think we'll see like the Gainesville teams will obviously lead the charge, having played an event under their belt. But I think the teams that are playing for the first time are going to catch up quickly, because there's already 1 week's worth of footage out there, and as they play with the teams that have played, they'll start to pick up the game a lot faster.
And there's a lot of specifically veteran teams that know this down pat already.
What do you mean, no? Like, what is this? Know this?
The process basically of waiting for that first district event and then going in and picking up the game easily. Because if you start looking at the top of the list, you have 1002, 1311, 1771, teams like 2974.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think a lot of those teams had like people at Gainesville, like volunteering and things like that. So
We actually had some 4910 people come by our pit, and they wanted to see what was going on with our robot. But I definitely saw a ton of 4910 people walking around. They were even stands just watching matches. So they were definitely scouting the game.
Yeah, the more learning you can do while you're not playing the game, that's
4910 is like licking their chops. Like, yeah, we got the DCMP banner this year, boys.
Basically.
So let's like focus down on specific teams, right? So if you got one team to watch at Dalton, who's it going to be?
So I'm gonna go with the obvious one out there, 4910. They've won Dalton.
That was my pick.
Well, they've won Dalton like what every year since it started.
I don't think they went in 2017. Whatever, go on.
But their robot is very kind of similar to last year's. So, and they have a strong programming core, and they seem to just know what they're doing right out of the gate every year when they go to their first event. So I expect them to come out strong. I expect them to show off some nifty things with their programming and controls, and they have a limelight too. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some really cool vision and stuff going on too.
How did the limelight work this time around for you guys?
Well, considering we had like
I'm pretty sure
a
the limelight
robot
wasn't
built.
It was one of the few things that was working. It was one of the few things.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you take a limelight, put on top of like a dumpster fire, it won't magically. Yeah, so like 4910 last year really surprised me because I think they came out their first match, right?
Right.
The first match they did a scale auto, I think.
Yeah.
And then they climbed, which at that point in Dalton was like, holy crap, what are they doing? They're going to win DCMP. This is going to be it. So I fully expect that from them this time. Like first match, every game piece scored, 2 rockets, and level 3 climb with 3 robots. So
yeah, we have some things to learn from them about how to go about a build season.
Lesson 1, let's try and not assemble the robot in the last few days.
You get it.
Good move.
Lesson 2, paint it purple.
Oh.
Yes.
Sorry, can't do that.
We're gonna have to talk about that one.
Does not fit with your style guide, I'm pretty sure.
All right, Kyle, who's your pick?
So, because I do not want to choose 2974, I'm going to go up the list. Listen, I'm okay
That
with
Wheeler-Walton rivalry.
that. Yeah, listen.
Oh, man. Okay, we're going to talk about this at some point in the future. I'm noting it down.
Please. I honestly want to say one of the teams that I think will be interesting to look at will be a team like 4026.
Global Dynamics?
Global Dynamics.
Why do you say that?
I say that because they're perennially a team that will take a less thought of route to get the most points. So,
Yeah, so like last year they had that, like the reverse 4-bar like thing.
yeah, their reverse 4-bar linkage, and it worked for them in some ways. But I think this year, in even they're specializing more with like the cargo akin to like a 1648, and they even have a pretty decent climb in the way that they actually just flip up onto the level 3.
Yeah, innovative solution they got there.
Oh yeah. So I think, and it looks like it hopefully they'll have it tuned in so that it's not taking as much time. So hopefully we'll see that increase in being able to handle more cargo, handle more hatches, and things like that in their matches.
So when you talk about flip up, that's like that robot in 3 days thing where they like grab the step and they rotate themselves up.
Oh no, they quite literally from off the ground they just flip up. They just flip up like this way.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
Let's see
about.
if I can find a video.
Okay,
to throw
we'll
up.
see if we can find a video. So I'm actually really intrigued by those flip-up designs because they don't take a ton of floor space, right? Because other robots have to load the entire drivetrain on. These seem to kind of like roll on, right? So I wonder if, say, 4910 goes on first.
Right.
They like go to the very back and maybe turn sideways, and then 4026 like flips up like behind them. Right?
Exactly.
That's a level 3 climb.
And a lot of other teams at some other district events have done that. So it's literally a multi-robot climb. It's just in some other cases it'll be that first robot just kind of sandwiches themselves to the wall, and the other robot kind of will get up there. In this case, they would just have to make sure that when they flip up, that they have their balance towards the actual robot that's already on there. That way they're not just falling off.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool to know.
Mm-hmm.
My pick, I'm gonna go with 1771. I've had sort of like when I was on 1261 was like a pretty solid, good team back in those days, and 1771 was like the rival that was like across the street. And so since then, 1771's kind of like gotten to a bit of a lull as people have moved on, but I think they're kind of back. So they have an elevator robot. They have a robot with an elevator. It has the West Coast Drive intake. They have a hatch panel, and they have a level 3 climb with like 3 stilts, kind of like Oscar. Right?
Yeah.
Hopefully a little faster.
Yes.
So I don't know if they're gonna be able to put all the pieces together, because that's like sort of been a bit of a concern for them.
Yeah,
so far.
Historically they've been kind of like building at their first event. Both districts, they've definitely gotten better about that, especially as the season goes on.
Yeah, so maybe not at Dalton, but I think they're the team to kind of keep an eye on. That you might not see them come out like killing it right away, but they have all the pieces, in my opinion. So we'll have to see how they do. What do you think?
I'm going to clean up with a couple of interesting mentions. Not just the one. A team I've been a fan of for a couple years now is 6177. They played a pretty smart game in the past for keeping it simple. I haven't seen too much of them this year, but from what I've seen, it looks like they're taking a bigger bite. So I'm interested in seeing what they're capable of over there.
I hope they don't choke. On the bite.
I have confidence. That they should have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah. Otherwise, my other kind of interesting mention is somebody who's playing for a second time already. Somebody who's been a strong robot in the past couple of years, but has found themselves in an interesting spot. Just due to I think they were in a similar boat we were, but that's 6705. They've had a couple of strong seasons. Had a rough go of it this week 1, where I think they got 11 district points, so they got some groundwork up in a very short time. But I'm very interested in seeing how they rebound from their week 1 performance to hopefully put themselves in a better spot for later in the season.
Yeah, those are both some pretty juicy picks. 6705, I mean, I wouldn't even say they're on the bubble. I think they're very much at risk of not making it to states.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like last year, the cutoff was about 45 points.
Yeah, right about 44, 45. Yeah.
So they have 11 points right now. I think it's gonna be make or break for them, like literally.
You'd have to clean up at this event.
Yeah, and they have 3 days.
Something like
Monday,
that.
Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they're loading in on Thursday.
Yeah, and that's not even just counting in case of any damage that they had to their robot during the course of Gainesville with all this new defense.
Yeah.
So it could mean that their turnaround time could be, or the lack of turnaround time could be, possibly their downfall. Possibly.
That's kind of the risk you take with these week 1 and week 2 events. Like, you got to be ready at the very beginning, and you have to stay strong, because otherwise you don't get any chances later on to iterate until district championships if you make it.
Yeah. And 6177, I mean, for those that don't remember last season, they built a switch bot, right? But at the end of the event, they were flirting with a multi-cube autonomous. They ran 3rd, right? So I think if they were ever going to try to take a bigger bite, I think this would be the season, right? To like really say, okay, we did good last season with what we tried. Let's step up, right? But I kind of don't know if they needed to step up, considering like how the ground game almost dominates this year, right?
Yeah, with the amount of low-level scoring opportunities, this is certainly a game that lends itself to their prior skill set. So I'm curious how they've went about it.
Yeah, so I mean, they have an elevator, like a 2-stage elevator. They have like a hybrid intake. Kind of reminds me of like a prettier looking like 1102 married 118, and they had like 6177, right? But yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like if they play this game right, they won't have to use their elevator very much at all, which is kind of ironic. But I think for them, Dalton will be kind of like an ironing out game. That they show up, they get through their kinks, and then they show up at their next event really at closer to full strength.
Also, they do have like a lot of their coach and mentor base are experienced with first. Like there are a couple on that team that are from our alumni from 1648, right?
Yeah, Sonny and I mentored a few of the kids that are now mentors on that team.
Yeah, shout outs to Gabe, Ellie, and Joseph, I think, are the three over there.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, they were pretty strong with like mechanical and electrical, even just strategy. Gabe being like an insanely good driver.
Yeah. I didn't teach him everything I know.
he definitely picked up a lot of that on his own.
It sounds like you want to come out of your sabbatical.
No.
Put me in, coach.
All right. So on that chipper note, we're gonna end the show.